I am here with Fearless Entrepreneurship Live. I have a special guest today. I've got Bill Dodd with Mud Hut Studios joining me. And Bill and I just recently met, and I'm so excited. And when we did, I'm like, can you come on the show and chat with me? So thank you, Bill, for being here. How are you doing?
Sure. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Good, good. So Bill has Mud Hut Studios, and I thought it was super cool because it is a recording studio, but he doesn't just doesn't have the recording studio. He also does social media marketing and website design, all the same things that I do. But of course, when I saw the studio, I was like, this is super cool. And, what about, we haven't talked about musicians. I don't, I don't, haven't really, I have worked with some musicians in regards to running ads for their events, but you really work with musicians and you are a musician yourself, right?
I am.
So tell me a little bit about the type of musician you are and how you went from that to Mud Hut Studios.
Well, actually, I was always a musician ever since I was in high school. And through a ton of life change events, I ended up starting a recording studio almost 30 years ago now. And over time, it had to morph as the music industry began to change, almost crumble. And I began doing video approximately 15 years ago, and then got into website design. And I worked for IBM for 10 years, so I have some technical ability. But it kind of morphed itself into a general digital communications organization, I would say.
Very cool. So then let's talk about musicians right now and what's going on. I know when you and I chatted a little bit, we said we were going to talk about music and live streaming. So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, I know things are changing, especially right now for musicians. With everything with the pandemic, it's not like you can go out and play at a gig and, in that restaurant or that bar or that venue. Things are a little bit different now. So musicians are doing things differently. Talk to me about what they're doing, and they have to feel the pain right now.
There's no question about that. I'm going to go with 3 precepts before we start. They're my opinions, but anybody in this industry would agree with what I'm saying. They might add to these a few things. Might add a few things to this, but generally there are 3 things about current music performance that we probably want to remember. The first is that the music business is really the entertainment industry. And in the entertainment industry, there is a component of supply and demand that we can't ignore. And that is that demand is very fluid. It changes, your musical tastes, our musical tastes have changed over the years. Certainly every couple of years, there's a new band. It is a very quickly changing demand component, shall we say. And typically with any kind of performance art, the supply generally outstrips demand. So it tends to be a venue-specific delivery of music. I'm going to keep talking about it like it's a product, but it is in the end.
Right.
And so it's the entertainment industry. And we used to remind each other of that when we got on stage, right? So we'd always say, hey, this isn't about the music, it's about entertainment. So that's number one. Number two, over the last 15 years, about a decade and a half, all of the significant technological impact on music has been in production, the making of the music, and logistics, the delivery of the music. And I'm not saying there hasn't been any technological advancement in musical instruments themselves, but a mandolin is still a mandolin, a tuba is still a tuba. There's been some changes, maybe a little bit, but nothing compared to the impact that the way it's produced and the way it's delivered has been. That's a very important thing to remember, because the technology is there for really high quality streaming right now. The third thing that we want to remember about music, and again, all live art performance, but we're talking music today, is it's a very interactive experience. So the musicians interact with themselves, they interact with their instrument, and they, most importantly, interact with their audience. So those three precepts really kind of set the foundation for what is happening right now in live streaming as far as musicians are concerned.
And you and I were chatting again a little bit and saying that you've been able to live stream for a while now and go live. And I personally did not see many musicians doing it prior to this. And maybe you have, or maybe anybody watching maybe or listening has seen that. But it seems like right now they are all getting very creative and bringing their product to all of us and playing music and actually keeping us really entertained at home. I've enjoyed it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the technology has been there for a while. And the reason you haven't been seeing it is that it has to do with the demand and where consumption of live music takes place. Generally, a musician wants to get paid. A venue owner wants you to visit the venue, whether it's a winery, a brewery, a bar, what have you. So musicians have been a little bit reluctant, for obvious reasons, to give away their music or play live, except where it was kind of a fun thing to do until now.
Yeah. And you know what? I just thought of this, and I don't believe this is rolled out, and maybe you've heard it or maybe you haven't, but now Facebook events, you're going to be able to pay to attend an event on Facebook. So I wonder if any musicians will continue to do that. What do you think? Do you think that they would host their own event? Because there are some bands, like, they have a very loyal following. People will go anywhere to hear them play.
Right. Yeah, so here's where this gets a little bit tricky, and it's why, yes, you and I have discussed, and I've heard you discuss this before too with others, communications and product delivery are very different industry to industry. So in this particular industry, as we kind of hit on that first precept, there's supply outstrips demand, and demand has to do with very specific venue or locations, geographies. So one of the things that we've seen here is, first of all, there are musicians doing it free. I have a friend who gets up every morning and plays a couple of songs on Facebook Live. We have other bands locally that have set up their entire band very early on in this, when all of their next 2 months got canceled. And they also did it for free, right? They started talking about how to do virtual tipping, virtual tip jars, and there are lots of little apps out there. And Facebook, of course, is trying to assist in that and get on that bandwagon. The issue here, and we'll get into a little bit about why this isn't quite as happy day as we would want it to be, is that most of these musicians have a set list. So if you play for 3 straight hours on live streaming and then say, we're going to be back tomorrow, you're coming back with the exact same songs you played yesterday, right, or today, yeah. And it's still on Facebook. So people don't really have to come back on and listen to you unless you're hilariously entertaining. And there are some people out there like that. So that could work. So what has happened here is that a lot of musicians, I know a lot of professional musicians, and by that I mean people that play maybe 300 dates a year. So their revenue stream is definitely deeply impacted by this. But most of the musicians I know, they use it to augment. They may have a day job, or they do other things like music lessons, things of that nature. And so what we're finding is that, let's call it $500 to $800 a month suddenly disappears out of, you're not going and playing. So that money is now gone. The real trick here is how you can play something, do something interesting enough over a period of month to generate that kind of revenue. So that is something that we've all been talking about and kind of worried about, to be very honest with you. And you've got different tier levels of musicians. You've got tier one traveling, touring musicians that aren't doing anything. You have your tier two. They're the next kind of regionally famous, trying to get to the tier one. And then you've got tier threes that are out on the road attempting to build a name for themselves. Well, everybody's back home. And you can imagine the financial models each of those groups would have, and how much money they would need. I mean, I know bands that would go out for 3 to 4 months and come back and not have any money left over whatsoever because they just didn't make it. So it's been a tricky thing to try to monetize. That's the challenge that I'm seeing right now.
Right. So there is a group of musicians that are really trying to think outside the box, because we don't know how long this is going to last. And so that they are looking for ways to monetize what they're doing right now.
That is true. And, not to be, I don't want to be too negative about this, but most of the musicians I talk to, and I did reach out to several because I have my opinions, but there's others out there that really are more impacted than I am because I do other things, right?
Right.
And most of them feel that the venues are never going to come back the way they just were. And let's face it, if you were a venue owner and the thing is lifted, you're going to have half capacity or less than you had. And the first call you're going to make is to your entertainment and say, hey, I've been paying you $300. I'm going to pay you $150. Take it or leave it. Give me your answer right now. So everything changes, even when it comes back.
Wow. You know what? I didn't think about that as far as, in my opinion, I would think like everybody's going to want to go out and listen, but you're right. There will probably be restrictions on those venues of how many people. I've got Lori here. Lori Sika will be on tomorrow, and she's like, I like the virtual tip jar. Doesn't pay the bills, but it's something. I agree with you. And do you know what that app is that does that virtual tip jar that I could share?
I would answer like this. So many apps have suddenly become available that it's best to do a search, quit search online and figure it out, because there were a couple around and now everybody's on board. There's so many of them. You would want to find out who's had good luck with them before you chose one.
Yeah, I like that too, Lori. And I think that's a great idea. I'd never heard of that, but definitely can benefit. Now, there are some areas that have changed or started using this live streaming a little bit more. And what have you seen as far as which areas those are, or who's really utilizing it?
Okay, so we'll go back to the fact again that the technology is available to do an incredibly great sounding live stream. And that's important because we're musicians and we want to make sure our audio sounds as good as it can. The technology has been there, but now we're forced into a scenario where we've got to do it. So there are two additional areas beside the virtual tip jar and the free streaming that people are doing. The first is churches. I had 2 calls this past week from churches. They are continuing to do a minister or priest at the pulpit. They're trying to have their musicians somewhere in the church. And they are definitely looking to upgrade their audio and their music for their live streaming Sunday services. And then the other one is lessons. All of the teachers I know have attempted to move to virtual lessons, and they've had mixed success in that, I think, up till now.
Yeah, now that's interesting. And I know I've been watching church on Sunday online as well. And at first they were live streaming, and then they just started recording and doing that. Now, is that something that you would do to help churches or musicians? Like, you can also do the recording or help them set up live streaming?
Yes, I can. I definitely, and I have done that. But everybody right now, and in case you haven't noticed, everybody's trying to be self-contained. And so where I help is I recommend maybe some equipment they can purchase or different approaches to what they were doing. And right now there are mixers where all the knobs and the faders and slider things are. There are mixers that terminate in a USB, so it'll go straight into your computer and you can stream. Use the same microphones you would use when you performed live or in the church. Or if you already have a good mixer, you can buy an interface that also terminates in a USB connector. So you can use your existing mic setup and your existing instrument setup and then run through a converter, we'll call it, into the computer. So there are quite a few things out there. What you're seeing is this recorded piece is because the musicians are uncomfortable that their music is sounding as good as they want it to sound. So a lot of churches have gone to recording it and posting it on YouTube as opposed to live streaming because of the music. So that's an interesting thing that you brought that up, because it was a necessity thing.
That is interesting, and I never thought of that. I just figured it was out of convenience, right? Just record everything and broadcast it on Sunday, and then you can
it's not convenient. It's anything but convenient.
Yeah. I did not think of that, but yeah, the quality of the music, they have more control over everything and the content when it is pre-recorded, but it is a little bit more work than just live streaming it. So Elizabeth Nader said her kids are doing music.
It is, and they don't have the equipment,
which is super cool. I think churches will now continue to live stream even when we go back to the building. Can I tell you, Elizabeth, I have to agree with you. I'm out here in Montana, and as of Monday, things were lifted. Retail was back in, and I believe churches as well. But the church that I attend did say, we're going to continue just live streaming and sit tight a little bit longer. But I have really started to enjoy going to church in my living room. And, I kind of hope that they do. And I know there's still something about getting plugged in and being there, but I don't know. Elizabeth, I'm curious. Like, if you have the option, will you go to church or will you watch it from your living room? But yeah, so I don't know. What do you think, Bill? Do you think that they're going to continue?
Well, and that Well, I think for sure every church is going to get set up in order to do that, just in case this happens again in the near future or we have a resurgence. I think the nervousness behind it is the business model for their revenue stream. And are you still going to tithe or give money in the same way you did while you were in church and they shoved the collection plate in front of you? So churches are extremely nervous right now. I know that the music director I talked to a couple of days ago said his church was definitely going to plan to live stream at least twice a month. So I don't know if they're going to try to do that, although a lot of the larger churches have been streaming for years. And I mean that with an S at the end. So it would come. It's just that we've got traditional churches that are nervous.
And that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, because that was something that we actually talked about here at home, Jason and I. It's like, I wonder what their tithing is like. And our church's tithings are up huge virtually. That's cool. And I'm curious, this is where, and I don't want to call it the tip jar, but I know that there are a lot of churches have the app. I know when I was in Ohio, the churches that I attended, there was actually an app that you could donate right through the app. Because I'm newer here in Montana, I have not heard about the church I currently attend having that app. But that's interesting that they're really up for the churches she attends. That's some very loyal followers, very loyal congregation.
I could see that Elizabeth said that the ties are up quite a bit virtually. And I would say that it depends on the church and it depends on the congregation. Out east here, in some of the smaller communities, keep in mind that a lot of the churchgoers are at an age where they're not comfortable with live streaming, and they may not be comfortable with donating through a web app or through a mobile app or a web donate now button.
That's a valid point. It depends on the age and the general makeup of that congregation. So a younger congregation might be more in tune with that, as opposed to what you're saying, because you are in a very small community. And I understand what you're saying as far as that those there might be some older attendees that may not be comfortable with any of that. So if I am a musician, what can I do if I have a band, or if I have a church, since we've been talking a lot about churches as well, what can I do to keep myself out there? And I'm going to touch right back, as Elizabeth said, people have been mailing checks, but Pastor said 90% are virtual donations now. So yeah, I get that, Elizabeth. Totally get it.
So what musicians can do, I would be focused on two things. The first thing I would focus on is make sure you've got the technology that allows you to not use your webcam. It sounds like you're in the hollow room. You're just not going to have the nuances you would get if you were using your typical stage mic'd, plugged in mixer. So you're going to need to get yourself some technology. There's just so much out there. Just all you got to do is start reading online and going to places who want to sell you that. And you'll find out quickly that you can do that. So you want to improve your quality, make sure that it's to what your audience would expect from you. Let's put it that way. And the second thing is you've got to address the supply and demand piece of this. You just cannot get on even once a week unless you cut the number of songs down. So the trick here is don't do your entire set. Do 2 or 3 songs out of your first set and call it a day. Because we are just, again, this live performance, this creative art performance world, the supply has traditionally always outstripped the demand. And if you just start giving it away, all of it for free, there's really no reason for anybody to throw much in a tip jar if they can just. I have a friend whose band did it really quickly right after everything was shut down. They've had 10,000 views since that time. They have no virtual tip jar. They haven't asked anybody for any money. And again, they weren't doing this for that particular reason. But you can see you've got to take into account that you've got to have some idea what your business model is before you do it.
Great advice. I have another question, because you mentioned that to not use your webcam, and I agree with you. Even though I'm using my laptop right now and the camera, I know that the audio is a little bit echoey, and I have my ring light plugged in, so I can't put my other one in. But is there like, what if they didn't have the budget to really invest into expensive equipment? If they have an iPhone or a newer Droid, is the camera and sound quality better or worse or about equal?
So right now, unless you are 10 years back, most webcams are going to give you a good enough video for you to use. It's the microphone, the built-in microphone on those cameras, that is the culprit. So you can very quickly, if you do want to use your phone, there are microphones available that plug directly into, and my gosh, the difference in quality, the difference in price is mind-boggling. So you've got to do your research, but you can easily plug in a microphone that can be moved closer to the mouth or to the instrument if it were that, and then they plug directly into the phone. So you're not using a microphone that was designed for you to talk on the phone in order to reproduce music.
And there are some really affordable microphones, even that will Bluetooth to your phone as well. And I know you probably go on Amazon or,
Yes.
I don't know. I'm sure I'm thinking Best Buy, but I really don't know. But probably go to, or your local music store. They may even have that, right? So, excuse me, to get that equipment.
Some might, but they're all closed.
Well, if they have a website designed by you, they have an e-commerce site, they can ship it, ship the equipment. You can go online and order. And if they don't, then they need to get in touch with you to have you do that, right? So anyhow, Bill, tell me and tell everybody who's listening how they can get in touch with you if they need any services from Mudhut Studios.
So my website is mudhutstudiosonline.com, and my email is bill@mudhutstudios with an S online.com.
Perfect. I want to thank you so much for hanging with me today. I know it's been crazy. I really enjoyed talking with you. Excuse me, I still have that tickle from that test today, but enjoy talking with you with Sheris, and then even more so chatting with you today about just music and some options and things I have honestly not even thought about. So I appreciate you just bringing that to light for me and everybody else who's listening. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. And all musicians would appreciate anything anybody can do.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you're a musician, I hope you caught this. If not, hit rewind and listen to the whole thing. There's some good stuff in here. So, all right, everybody, I will catch you later tomorrow. I've got Laura Sicca with me, and who knows what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to find out after this and see what we talk about, but we're going to have fun. So I'll catch everybody tomorrow.